stream that I need to delete because right now we've got my friend Raphael joining us, and I'm so excited. All right. So we have got him. I'm trying to add him right now. I need to cancel the other live stream. Oh my goodness, we've got 7 people waiting. Raphael, we've got
Hey,
7
Jen.
waiting on the other stream. So I am telling them right now that we're not doing that one. They're going to jump over here. It's going to be amazing. So Raphael, you want to tell everybody who you are and what you do while I am looking at the channel trying to figure this out?
Sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't think I'm anything extra special. I have a podcast that I host called used to be called the Edgehog Podcast. I rebranded it to the Arfro Podcast, which is just short for Rafael Flores Podcast, where I talk about. I started talking a lot about business, and then kind of shifted over to spirituality, and that connection makes a little bit of sense, and I can sort of explain why. And then I ended up talking about Christianity and different religions, and now I converted myself to Orthodox Christianity, and so that's really now the focus of my podcast. It's really like unpacking all of the Christian symbology, Christian ethics, morality, the source of what might be relevant to your audience is like the source of law, where it comes from, what it means, and then sort of like the consequences of an increasingly secular view of like the world in general. And so it's like really just trying to get in that conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. So, today we're going to be talking about, this our first Tea and Justice episode. So, my tea of choice today is a boba tea. Sometimes it will be a hot tea, but
Nice.
because I thought, there's a lot going on out there that's kind of wild in the
Oh yeah,
world. And what is calming and relaxing? It's tea, right?
that is
So we
true.
can sip a little bit of tea, talk a little bit of justice, chat with the people in the chat, and kind of go from there. And the question was, is it legal? And we have a few things that we could talk about. Good night. Yeah, I got a list of things to talk about. So, yeah, Julie is here. So, Raphael, Julie is from Australia, and
Nice.
she joins us. So, Julie, I finally figured out our live streams. So excited. Raphael is my first Tea and Justice guest. So, we're gonna sit and enjoy some tea and have a cuppa, depending on where you're at in the world, and talk about what's going on out there because it's crazy. That's going to be Tuesday. We're going to have guests on Tuesday, and then Thursday is the shower talks or the shower thoughts live, and then Saturday will be at the beach. So we'll just have a few different things. There's some crazy things going out in the world today, guys. Raphael, you know what? Let's just lead out of the gate with something. Is it legal? Are you ready?
Sure.
Let's go big. Supreme Court upholds the deportation under the Alien Enemies Act today. Woo, I feel like you and I are going to have an interesting conversation about this one.
Yeah.
Um, so this is chat's given me information, guys. It can be fallible, so I will double check it, but I'm going to read you what it said, and then we can kind of talk about it. And is this, well, I don't know. The U.S. Supreme Court's ruled in favor of Trump administration allowing the deportation of Venezuelan migrants deemed to be gang members under the Alien Enemies Act. Now, this is not a group of everybody. This is just what they're calling Venezuelan gang members. Decisions that ignited debates about the application of wartime statutes to current immigration policies and the potential implications for due process and human rights. So Raphael is not a lawyer. He is
I'm not.
he is not. He has a business. He is a brilliant, honestly, brilliant marketing guy. He is a friend of mine, and he does a bunch of, well, you can talk about all the things you do. He's
Sure.
also a creator. So neither one of us are lawyers. We are just two people having a conversation about what's going on in the world. Yeah. Do you want to tell him all the things you do?
Yeah,
Like
I
your
mean, I think
things?
it's more relevant to your audience, and I think to the question. I mean, I do have a master's in international relations. I do have a bachelor's in political science. So I would approach this from that angle. I mean, I'm not gonna say whether something is legal or not. I'm not qualified to do that. Um, what I can tell you though is that Venezuela is run by you could call it like, I mean, I think it's like a newer term, but it's like a political cartel basically, right? Where you have a very small group of people that basically use this communist ideology to siphon power to themselves. and then they impoverish everybody else. And I know this, not just from reading about it, but I know people that lived in the area, and they told me about the process of them moving from Venezuela to the US. And it is a terrible country in many respects. The people are great, as most, I think most countries have amazing people, but it is a regime that is, not, I wouldn't even, I mean, it's not, I mean, they claim to be communist, but it's more of just like an authoritarian regime that has basically impoverished the entire nation, right? And so when you have a nation like that, and you have a nation that doesn't enforce laws, well, then you have, gang activity, which then ends up going to the only logical place for most gang members, which is the United States.
Yeah. And I think the whole thing with separation families and all that kind of thing, I think that's okay. That's completely separate from what
Hmm.
we're talking today.
Yeah.
Like but I feel like I feel like in any country, right? US or any other country, if you have people that come in to do harm, they don't have the right to stay in that country. Now,
Yep.
I think the question though is not the question posed by you or I, but the question in general about what's happening is that really what the reasoning, right? Or is
Hmm.
it that being used? And you know what? I don't know. But I think like what you said, I think if there are really people that are gang members from there, that's not good. We don't want them here,
Right.
right?
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, well, one of the things. So I actually, it's interesting because I grew up right on the border between the U.S. and Mexico. And if you couldn't tell that by now, I'm Hispanic. I think that's pretty obvious. Um, so I grew up right on the border, and a lot of my friends and people that I grew up with, a lot of them inevitably fall into the drug trafficking world. And it's not like a badge of honor. It's actually quite a disgrace that ends up happening to a lot of people that live there. But it's because it's glorified, right? So they look at, I mean, Mexico has a really interesting culture when it comes down to the way they glorify drug dealing. Um, Not as a whole, but I think there is that sort of, especially in like the lower income communities, which happens to be most of Mexico, that gets glorified a lot. And I think that one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that an open border like what we had not too long ago is actually creating opportunities for cartel members that already have they already have a structure of power in that area anyway. And so it's just opened the door to things like human trafficking, because they make a lot more money actually from trafficking than they do from drugs, right? Now, I'm not gonna get into the realm of conspiracy to say like, oh, this is kind of like planned or whatever. Maybe I'm just gonna I'm gonna chuck it off to just political stupidity. Um, or just plain incompetence. But I do think that is something that is not talked about enough. Where you have these cartels that are making a lot more money from human trafficking than they are from drugs, and specifically trafficking of children, which is a huge issue, right? With the United States being, and anybody can fact check me on any of this stuff, but the United States is the number one consumer of child pornography as well, right? And so if you have an open border, then you have the opportunity for these people to then bring children into the United States and do whatever they want, which is a huge issue, right? That again, not a lot of people talk about. I think a lot of these sort of headlines of people being separated from the families and things like that get sensationalized in a way. And I do think that the media does have a bias. I think everybody has a bias. I think podcasts tend to be more conservative slash anti-establishment, but obviously the media tends to be more pro-government, more pro-establishment, right? I think that's a natural thing that happens. But yeah, I mean that's not something that people say when you listen to the rhetoric of people like Trump. Obviously, the way that the message is delivered is less than ideal, but the fact is that that is a real problem, and that is it is conducive to crime that we can't even begin to imagine. I mean, even people that are paying, they call them in Mexico, they call them pollero, which is like the chicken man, right? If you translate it literally, which is a person that will take people from Mexico, and then they'll pay them money, and then they'll bring them over. And a lot of the times they'll bring them in halfway, and then they'll just tell them, hey, you know what? I'm gonna charge you more money. Or they'll bring him halfway, and then they'll sell the women, right? And that stuff does happen because at that when you have a situation that is so lawless, I think that brings out the worst in people, right? In many respects. And you already have a cartel system that is already like, I would be pushing it to call them human in the way that they act. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, you would see things on the news of like public decapitations. You would have people that they would die, and then they would put like toads in their mouth or their genitals in their mouth, like crazy stuff like that, right? And so it's like those are the same people that are now running rampant in that area. which is horrible, you know, and I think that's a real problem.
That is a real problem. And I've got to change the settings because we're talking about things that we normally don't talk about. I'm going to change the settings real quick on here so
Sorry.
that you can continue. No, so you can continue to talk and then we can just have an honest conversation. Okay, because I think this is, it's really hard. Also, are you from San Diego? Is that where you're from?
No, so I actually am from a small city in Texas called El Paso.
Oh, from your
Well,
okay,
it's not
so
that small anymore, but yeah.
okay, because I'm from California, so I lived in a town called La Habra Heights, and for a
Hmm.
while in La Habra, where yeah, I lived in gang territory, so I know
Yeah.
what it's like over there. It is very dangerous,
Hmm.
and I was a single mom, and I remember there were shootings every day. My car was broken into all the time, and the police are like, "We're not going to do anything. We don't care about your car. Like we got bigger
Right.
things."
Right.
And then when I could move my daughter to where there was shootings once a week, it was such a big deal instead of
Hmm.
every day, and people
Right.
can't even relate, right? And
Yeah.
so we dealt with a lot of that stuff, and it's hard. And I don't think people
Hmm.
understand unless you've been in it and you know what it's like. Because
Yeah.
we had a kid in fifth grade threatening my daughter because he was from a gang family, and he had broken someone's bone in fourth grade. Like
I believe it.
it's a lot. It's a lot. So yeah, so we're not talking about families. We're not talking about whatever. We're talking about, like violent people, like
Yeah.
that yeah, we don't want on the streets, no matter who they are or where they're from, right?
Right. Exactly.
But the fact that you have this master's, this is amazing. See, I didn't even know this when I brought you on today, so this is very exciting.
Well, I got it in Russia of all places, which is interesting.
Did you really?
I did. Yeah, I lived there for 3.5 years.
Okay, so no, 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 no.
Hmm.
Well, we need you to tell your personal story. Okay, so hold on. So you're from Texas. How do you get
Hmm.
to Russia to get your master's? This is
Well, I think like I would say the first 21 years of my life were pretty uneventful. You know, it's just regular small town stuff. But then I when I went to college, everybody has to take a foreign language, and like obviously, the obvious thing was take Spanish because I already speak Spanish. But obviously, a border town, everybody takes Spanish because everybody knows it. Nobody wants to have to, they can just breeze by. So it was like, okay, so Spanish is out, French is out, Italian is out because I'm a notorious procrastinator. So then it was like, okay, well, you can either take Chinese, Hebrew, or Russian. I'm like, well, I think Chinese and Hebrew sound pretty difficult. Russian seems to be something that maybe I could, get a B or a C at least. So I took the first semester and I fell in love with the culture and the language and the history and the mythology, which is also very interesting. And then after that, I applied for a program. I didn't get into it. And then I applied for a different one. And I went there for a full year through that program. And then I went back again through the Department of Education for like another 4 months. And then like my Russian was okay. At that point, I was like, you know what? I've invested so much time into this. So when I graduated, I was actually going to go to law school, ironically enough. And then I said, you know what? Screw law school. I'm going to go and get my master's over there. And then that's how I ended up. And so I actually went to the same college that Vladimir Putin went to.
really
Yeah,
okay. So what's
St. Petersburg State University.
that is
There's a
incredible.
plaque right outside of it. Yeah.
Wow, that is so cool. All right. Oh, Julie said I was learning Spanish, but my tutor had to stop coming here because of the restrictions. Yeah. I learned Spanish. I learned Spanish well because I was in LA. I learned French, but
Mm,
and I tried learning Russian. We had a girl living with us that was from Russia for a little while, and all I
hmm.
remember is Voda, like water. That's all I remember. I don't remember any. One of my closest friends is they're actually from Russia. Um,
Mm.
which is a whole other story. But yeah, that is so very cool. So I'd imagine your Russian is completely fluent then at this point, or it was.
Well, it's a very difficult language. So I wouldn't say it's fluent. I mean, I would say it's close because I mean, my children speak Russian, my wife speaks Russian, so it's close. But it depends on what I'm talking about, right? So if I have to start talking about like more difficult concepts, I'm not gonna have the words for it, and it can get very complicated at a certain point. It is a very complicated language.
Well, this is fascinating. All right. Well, okay. Let's talk about something else then that has to do with that. And you can say yes or no. Okay,
Sure.
Ukraine. Is there any
Mhm.
possible way they can win?
No, not at all. No, not a chance. Absolutely not. They can't win. They just can't. I'm sorry. It's a war of attrition. Russia has like the three times the population. They are a much larger industrial power. They have all the natural resources that you could imagine. They also have a really well trained military. They also have invested a lot of money and a lot of time in military development and infrastructure. So yeah, no, not a chance, not a chance.
Okay. I mean, it's what it seems like to me, right?
Yeah,
But
I mean that's just an objective like standpoint, right? I'm not supporting either one of them. Um, but yeah, it's just I think it's just not gonna happen.
yeah, that's what I think too. All
And
right.
also, Russia has more nuclear bombs than any other country, right? So that's always kind of like their trump card, so to speak. You know,
Right.
it's like if it ever gets to that, they're I think they have like couple thousand, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And I mean, that doesn't do anybody any good once those things start coming out. Okay, so Julie says she doesn't speak Russian, but she does speaks, yeah, 5 languages, Julie. That's incredible.
Wow, that's
And
really impressive.
is it true that Zelensky was a comedian before?
He was a comedian and an actor. Actually, ironically enough, he was an actor in a movie. It might have been a movie or a TV show where he actually played a president, which is really funny.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. And
Reagan was an
actually,
actor,
before
but yeah.
him, before him, there was a democratically elected president in the area that was like ousted, and then he was put into power. Like, I'm not gonna go into like deep state stuff because I'm not as well versed on it, so I don't want to give people false information. But I do know that for a fact. I also know that the whole issue with Crimea was because Crimea was a mainly Russian speaking population. And if I'm not mistaken, they wanted to make speaking Russian illegal, which caused a lot of issues, and that's sort of why Russia invaded. I mean, also, granted, Putin wanted access to the Black Sea, which kind of like was obviously beneficial to him. But I think it is. I mean, at least over there, the consensus is that as much as it was a strategic geopolitical move, it was also something where like people in the area did want to be annexed by Russia because it's mainly Russian people. It honestly like when you live in Russia, there's not really a lot of distinction between Russian and Ukrainian. It's like you could be speaking to somebody in Russian, and they might have family in Ukraine. It's extremely mixed. It's almost like the same as living on the border here, right? It's like there you could have a person that's like maybe Latino or Hispanic, but they're American, right? It's kind of the same, but I would say that runs even deeper because they have a lot of shared history. Uh, there was there was this like there was the first sort of like city of the then Russian Empire was in Kievan Rus it was called. So that's all of the culture sort of stems from there outward, and that was in the Ukrainian territory. I mean, Ukraine actually, so Krai means boundary in Russia, so Ukraine actually means like the boundary. So it was like the boundary to Europe. That's how it was considered by most of Russian history.
Wow. Okay, you are a font of information, and I'm so excited that you're here with me. This is so
I'm just,
cool.
I'm an obsessive learner. I think sometimes to a detriment.
No, but see, I mean, not to the level that you have studied, those kind of things, but I'm the same way. Like I love learning things and studying new things, and I feel like I should have 3 PhDs from YouTube at this point, like in
Right, right.
creator things,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that's what I do. So, anyway, all right, I'm trying to get more questions about Russia because I think this is an interesting
Sure,
um about that. So. Anyway, so let's take a break from deep, heavy stuff for just a minute. Are you settled
sure.
in your new house?
No, not yet. We're barely in the process. Actually, I can know if you can see, like, I've got all these boxes behind me over there, and like my puppy there, but I got
Oh,
these boxes here. So yeah, it's kind of a mess right now. But we're getting there.
it's a process, man. Well, and you got
It is. I
when you
hate
got
it.
kids and all that, it takes a while. So
Yeah, yeah. It's a pain in the ass.
yeah,
Can I? I don't want to curse, but like, can I? If it slips out, that's not like a thing, right?
it kind of is. If we can
Okay.
avoid it, it would be good.
I'll make sure to avoid it. Okay, okay.
Okay,
Just want to make sure.
because because there's some kids that watch, and so we
Oh,
try to
I see.
keep it
Okay, I
like
gotta make
kid
sure.
friendly.
Hmm.
I mean, we're talking about deeper things or whatever, but yeah. So we try to, yeah. Oh my goodness, I got all kinds of questions. Okay. What was it like as an American attending school in Russia? Like, did they treat you like good or bad? Like, for instance,
Hmm.
in France, when we go to France, they're not the biggest fans of Americans, right? So
Right.
I pretend to be Italian when I'm in France because I'm not, because people tend to
Hmm.
judge and they don't. so whatever. But is it like that there, or are they,
Oh no. Well, see, the thing is, there they make the distinction between like nationality and ethnicity. So like you could say like I'm American, but they're like, yeah, but like it's called like nationalness. So it's like not like it's not like our concept of nationality, which is like I'm American, right? I was born American, right? For them, it's like you have your like it's called nationalness, but then you also have like you have your citizenship, right? So it's almost two different things. And so for them, it's like if I'm like I'm American, they're like, no, you're not. You're something else, right? So it was always that conversation, and so I was like, okay, so where are you from? Are you like from Mexico? Like, what's going on? So I'm like, yeah, like all of my roots are Mexican. I was born, raised in the U.S., lived in Mexico for 4 years, but mainly American. So, but they were super curious about it, extremely, extremely welcoming. And the only thing is that for people that are not really like they're more westernized in the sense of like how they make friends with people, they can come off a little strong, but they're extremely curious people. Sometimes you'll find that the average Russian knows more American history than the average American, which is pretty funny. But I think that's like a theme across Europe as well. I mean, I haven't traveled as much, but I know that's a thing. And they're very welcoming, very curious. They want to make friends, and they know like a few English words, so like they get super excited when they get to talk to somebody in English because they get to practice. And most people there study English at one point in either elementary school, middle school, high school, or in college. So it's a huge thing if you're able to speak English. Everybody wants to talk to you because they want to, they want to improve their English. And also, it's always like when I was there, it was during the end of the Obama presidency, beginning of the Trump presidency. So it was always like, oh my God, they'll ask you questions about like Trump and it was really funny because like you would even see like ads of anti-smoking, and it'll be like, Obama smoking kills more people than Obama, and Obama kills a bunch of people, right? And like they would have that on like bus stations. But they're extremely, like I said, extremely welcoming. They do come off a little strong, especially the guys. They're a little rowdy, especially when they're drunk. But overall, I would say extremely welcoming people. And then as you start to get deeper in the culture, then you start to kind of like make out the personalities, right? Like because like in America, there's like different types, right? Like you've got a particular type of like Americanized Mexican person, and you got a particular type of like black person, a particular type of like white person, and you can identify them, right? So you're like, okay, you're that type. And it's the same over there, but because it's very homogenous in terms of the culture, so everybody kind of has a similar upbringing. Everybody has a similar culture because there's not as much immigration as it is in the U.S. Most people tend to have like a baseline of their culture, which we don't really have here as much because you have people from like Italy and London and Canada and Mexico and other places, right? So that makes it easier to understand them in a way. But yeah, they're just really interesting people overall. Very and even to this day, I still kind of have you know um, difficulty understanding certain aspects of their culture. Because like for example, this is a huge one. They look at friendship much differently than we do in America because for most Russian people, they will have the same group of classmates throughout their entire schooling. So their friends in kindergarten are the same friends in high school, and they're the same friends in college. And so they're like they have these long lasting relationships with their friends, which then like they see them more as like almost like family in a way. Whereas I feel in the US, a lot of our friendships and relationships tend to be very superficial, and like the aspect of friendship doesn't run as deep in American culture because for most Americans they don't stay where they grew up for the most part, right? So it's we move around a lot, and also there's like a lot of cultural divide in America, and again I think that's just a part of that's also something that I don't think a lot of other people from other countries understand because America is also very cliquish, right? So certain cliques of people don't really communicate with other cliques of people. But Russia's not really like that because, again, like I said, everybody has a baseline of the same things. Like most people had a very similar childhood, and so as a culture, they're much more cohesive. I would say in some respects. And I also think it's a consequence of like the U.S. losing that like what does it mean to be an American type of thing because we don't really know what it means anymore. But they still very much hold on to that. So culturally speaking, it makes it interesting to learn it because you know that who you're speaking about, they've all read the same books, they've all had the similar experiences, and it's much more. It's not. I wouldn't say standardized, but it's much more. It's more similar across the board, right? And there's also not as many distinctions between classes. Now there are, obviously wealthy people and not very wealthy people, but even within that, they still have a lot of similarities in terms of the culture and who they are and how they are. And so it's an interesting culture, but it's also very deep because Russian culture has been documented for a long time. So when you go to Russia, you're exposed to like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Pushkin and all these people, and because they've all read the same books, they all understand what it means. Like they call it dusha, which is like it translates to soul. So the Russian soul is something that they're all sort of like connected or familiarized with to some respect. So it's very interesting in that way.
That is fascinating. Yeah, and Julie was saying everyone knows more geography than Americans, and I feel like history too, because I
That is
know
true.
in Europe, they study everybody's history, right? Not just their
Yep.
own country's
Hmm.
history, even our
Yeah.
history. But we, for some reason, don't tend to do that.
No,
I
we don't.
know homeschooling, we do. We try to teach everybody, our kids about a lot of different cultures, and our
Hmm.
friends
Hmm.
are from all places all over the world, which helps them
Yeah.
learn about different things. But I think that is somewhere that we're sorely lacking, I think. But I
Yeah.
think there's so much diversity in culture here that
Hmm.
we forget that there's also that outside of here.
Yeah, well, and actually, one of the consequences of like hyper focusing on distinctions, right? Like for example, like DEI programs are a really good example of that, where when you focus on diversity, you actually don't solve the problem of diversity. You actually create. So you're hyper focusing on differences, which causes more difference and more separation. But when you focus on the thing that makes everybody similar, which is, you could say, like the American ideal, or like I said earlier, the Russian soul, when you focus on the similarity, then you are able to have a lot more diversity in a peaceful and more productive way, which is also a very interesting concept because you can apply it to business also. Like if you have a business with no clear mission, well, then what happens is that you have a lot of diversity in what that mission could mean individually speaking, right? And so that you don't have as much cohesion. And then that's the same as with the values, right? So if you're hyper focusing on the things that make you different, then that tends to grow, right? Like whatever you put your attention on psychologically grows. So if you're hyper focusing on the fact that like this group of people, and the other part of the problem is also, it's like you abstract people. So like when you're looking at the world through that lens, you're abstracting humans, and so they're no longer individuals, they're abstractions. They're like stereotypes of certain things, which obviously humans are a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it was interesting because when we did our award show last week, and I look out in the audience, and it's full of very different people, right? On the
Hmm.
outside.
Hmm.
They're
Yeah.
all people that I know, everyone there I had invited. And so, but it was just beautiful to see because I wasn't counting. Like I want these kind of people and those, it wasn't that, like you were saying, like the focus on the diversity. But when I looked
Hmm.
out there and I saw it, it made me so happy. And I think
Hmm.
that's what we need to get back to that, right? Is that
Yep.
not focusing on numbers of people we need certain specific kinds of people in this thing. We need the best people surrounding us doing the thing that they know how to do. And I think
Yeah.
naturally we're going to get that because that's what our country is made of, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and
And
it's
and
just,
diversity is a good thing, actually. It's just when you hyper focus on it or make it the focal point of society, that's when it causes problems.
yeah, it doesn't work. And then you're focused on, yeah, all the wrong things because
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, so that's really fascinating. This is a good conversation, Julie. What do you think? And I know you're in Australia, so there's a little bit less of that, but you have some distinct cultural things and some issues going on with that in your culture as well. Yeah, and I won't pretend that I know more about it. You absolutely know more about it than I do, but I know there's a whole thing with the different cultures there, and Well, in a lot of different, we've done a lot of different things in a lot of different places that would be nice to go back and undo. But we just move forward, right? And we have these conversations, open conversations where people can jump in and say things and join us and agree or disagree, right? Um, but okay, let's get back to is that legal? Oh, well, here's a question about the legal system. And what was your major? What was your master's in?
Well, a master's was international relations. So you do learn a couple of things, but I mean, one of the funny things about international relations is that it functions in like a system that's like, it's an anarchic system. So there's no like superseding global authority. So there's rules that are agreed but there's no enforcement, right? And the UN is not really an enforcement mechanism, especially considering that you have the Security Council, which like any country within the Security Council could basically veto any proposal, right? And it's made up of mainly most of the victors after World War II, which is the U.S., Russia, China, France, and if I'm not mistaken, I might be missing one more. And so, like any proposal put forth by the UN that goes against any of the interests of the people in the Security Council, because they all have veto power, which makes it extremely difficult to have any sort of legislation. And so that's the funny thing about international relations is that it's just unenforceable. There's no like actual law. Now there is like maritime law and things like that, but there's no like superseding government, that can dictate how a country behaves.
Let's okay, to get back to our culture thing, Julie, I just want to point out, she said it's important to learn about other cultures in addition to your own, albeit briefly. Yeah, Julie, I think that's right. Like it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to learn about different cultures. Or if I make a friend, or I'm going to do something with somebody from another culture, learn about that
Hmm.
culture so I know that I don't do something that is offensive in that culture. Because there are
Yeah.
things we do as Americans that are very offensive to people in other cultures, and you would never know if you
Yeah.
didn't, and all you have to do is just look it up. It doesn't take that long.
Hmm.
But so
Yeah.
what was that like moving over? Were there things like that where they had different, I don't know, different things that we would do here that you would never do there?
I mean, there's like the superficial things, like for example, like everybody takes off their shoes indoors when they go to a house. That's not an American thing. Like Americans just we walk in their house with our shoes on. That's not a thing in Russia. I mean, everybody loves drinking tea. They drink tea a lot all the time. I mean, I just like kind of like the way they talk. They tend to be very kind of like direct in a way, but that's just kind of also the way that the language works. Actually, it's very direct. It's not you don't usually have as many. Well, because the thing is, like with Russian language, it's like you use very few words, but you conjugate the words to change the meaning. So that also makes it like that. And also, one thing is they don't smile. Actually, it's very in public. People don't smile, which is kind of a big culture shock to most Americans because Americans are always walking around with a big smile. At least that's how we're portrayed. And so, yeah, people don't smile at all. Very, very like And also another thing is that every time you ask a Russian how they're doing, 9 times out of 10 they're gonna tell you I'm doing okay. They never tell you when they're doing good. And it's this sort of like post-Soviet thing where they don't want people to know when they're doing well because you never know who you might offend or who might get jealous and like, accidentally kind of try to, tell the police on you and come up with some, false whatever thing. So you get sent to the gulag. So people are very private about their economic status or how they're feeling or because like for them it's like if you ask me because Americans are like, hey, how are you doing, right? It's like kind of like a generic thing that we ask everybody, but for them it's like if you ask me how I'm doing, like I'm gonna tell you how I'm doing and then I'll start telling you about my husband who beat the crap out of me or whatever, right? That's how they think about it. And for us it's like we're not trying to go there. It's just we're just trying to make small talk, and small talk is not really a thing there, which is kind of refreshing, because like you'll start talking to somebody randomly on the metro, which doesn't really happen in the metro, but let's say at a bar, right? You go to a bar or park, you spark up a conversation with someone, and before you know, you're out there talking about their lives, like having these deep conversations with somebody you just met, and that's kind of the beauty of that the culture, but it's kind of a culture shock to a lot of Americans because we're not used to that.
Yeah, one of my best friends is from Russia, and yeah, I love that aspect. You
Yeah.
know where you stand, you know what's happening, there's no beating around the bush with things.
Right.
It is what it is. And yeah, it is refreshing because I think, and this whole thing here where we ask people, how are you doing? And we really don't care. We don't want you to tell us anything negative. I'm not talking about me, but in general, right? People don't want to
Yeah.
hear how you're really doing. They just want you to say you're fine and move on.
Right. 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 Well, I think it's also interesting because I felt that I had more freedom of speech there than I did here. Not maybe not, legally speaking, because you can't really speak out against the government as much because you could get in trouble. But I felt that when I spoke to somebody on the street, I could share my ideas much more openly without feeling like this is going to land the wrong way. And that was also very interesting to me because I also feel that like usually I feel that legislation or law is downstream of culture. That's just my opinion. And I think that what happens is that when you have a culture that polices itself, then you don't need to have the legislation that enforces the policing, right? So, for example, like I don't think it's like that anymore in the U.S., but it did get to the point in the U.S. where you couldn't say an opinion that might have, not been contrary to the mainstream, right? Whatever that opinion is. Over there, though, I felt that I could say some of those things a lot more openly without feeling like I'm gonna get recorded and called a bigot type of thing. So that was also very interesting to me. I'm like I feel so much more free in that respect here. Obviously, like I said, you can't talk about Putin, but most people still do in their day-to-day conversations. A lot of people don't like him. A lot of people do like him, actually. Oddly enough, you'll still find people there, older generations mainly, that love Stalin, which is like everybody knows Stalin killed like millions of people, but you'll still find them. People that really drank the Kool-Aid, like really drank the Kool-Aid. But you'll find them. And again, it's like it was very interesting to feel that because it got to the point, especially when I was in college here, that it was like I don't really feel like I can say that because I know the consequences of doing that, just like how people are gonna police me or how I'm gonna be seen or portrayed or whatever.
Absolutely. And I think it's so sad, and I tell this story all the time, but when I was growing up, my dad was a Republican, my mom was a Democrat. Their
Hmm.
friends were in politics. It didn't matter what side. I don't even know what side half
Right.
those people were on, but we would get together, we'd help them with their campaign, we'd do all the things. We would have these incredibly intellectual conversations about
Hmm.
politics and all those things, and like intellectual sparring, but not fighting,
Right.
just
Right.
that people would share their opinion, not at all even assertively, just matter of fact, right? And the
Yeah.
other person would share their opinion. They never stopped being friends or thought the
Right.
other or called each other names. They had a different opinion and they were okay with that.
Yeah.
And they had an eclectic group of friends. I mean, you would never
Hmm.
think these people would belong in a room together, but it was
Right.
incredible to listen to that as a kid. But then I
Right.
grew up and now we can't have that. Like
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
conversation like you and I were having right now, a lot of other people wouldn't be able to have it or didn't stick
Right.
around for it while they were here because it was too much. But I think it's important that we do have them and we talk about things, and people may not agree, right? And that's okay. You don't
Hmm.
have to agree. But if we
Right.
don't have the conversations, I don't know. I had a conversation with somebody a little while ago. We had been friends for a while, and she brought up one topic and she said, I could never be friends with somebody that thought the opposite of this thing than I
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
And we were at the beach at this homeschool thing. And I said, well, when this is over, let's just go sit on the beach and let's talk because I feel the opposite way that you do. And I think we can still be friends. And we sat there
Hmm.
for about 2 hours and she shared what she thought and I shared what I thought. And at the end, we are still friends because, it doesn't mean that we can't be. We can just agree to disagree for the most
Right.
part. I mean, there's certain things, there's life and death things that clearly,
Hmm.
but I
Hmm.
think it's so important that we are able to do that kind of stuff. And so that's really interesting that they can do that over there more than we can, you know?
Yeah, well, I think it's a consequence of looking at humans as abstractions. Like and I think it's like when you abstract human beings in that way. So for example, like okay, straight white male equals patriarchy, right? Black single woman equals oppressed, whatever it is, right? And I think when you look at people like that, you don't see the individual, you see the abstraction, right? And so the abstraction can be made to symbolize or be associated with negative things, right? Whether it's like oppressor or oppressed, and that's sort of the Marxist ideology. That's actually the root cause of why Russia, murdered 26 million people during the communist regime, was because of that same idea of a dichotomy between a group that oppresses and a group that is oppressed. And so what happens is that the people that are oppressed are only seen as oppressed, and therefore they have the moral high ground and um, the moral excuse to take away power or to take the lives of those that are oppressing, right? And it's the same. And so, like, the patriarchy is a great example of that, because we're being told that the structure of not just the world, but the structure of history is through the lens of oppressor and oppressed. And not only is that totally wrong, it's also insidious, because it's all about pitting groups of people against each other. And then if you take that a step further, when you create, kind of going back to the diversity conversation, you take that a step further, and the more groups you create within a society, the more conflict that you cause. Because then again, then you have abstractions about abstractions about abstractions, and so there's no unity, right? And so now people are, reverting back to sort of like that tribalist mindset of looking at the other person not as an individual, but as an abstraction, a symbol for something negative, right? An enemy, for example. And that's what happens, it's or what is happening, or maybe not as much anymore, in the US, where they're looking at the world and saying, well, you have an oppressor group, i.e. white straight male, and you have an oppressed populace, i.e. everybody else, right? Unless you're gay, because if you're gay, then you don't qualify as an oppressor, even though you may be a white male, which is interesting, right? So it's just a really, really insidious way of looking at the world and looking at people. Marxist ideology is the same thing that caused all of those millions and millions of lives, in the entirety of, ever since 1905 in the October Revolution. But the same in Germany, because a lot of people forget that the Nazis were actually socialists, which is pretty interesting, because they almost look at them like as a separate kind of like group. So it's like you have like the extreme left being the communists and the extreme right being the fascists, right? But in actuality, the fascist movement was called the social. It was a socialist movement, right? Because it was a workers' party. The only distinction between those two actually is the role of race, right? So then the Nazis would look at race as a crucial part of the way that society was structured. But the same idea of state controlled everything, particularly the economy, all under the understanding that there is an oppressor group and oppressed. In Germany, it was the Jews. In Russia, it was the proletariat, right? But it's the same concept. And so for me, it's really interesting. You have now in America the leftist ideologues that are saying, well, Trump's a fascist and Elon Musk's a fascist and all of these like Republicans are fascists, but they don't understand that they're calling them the same thing that they already exhibit in themselves, which is super ironic, actually, right? And so that's one of the things that I think we see in America, and that's just a slippery slope, because in that you start to change legislation. Like, I mean, a great example of this is the kid. I don't know if you saw that news piece in the UK of a kid. I think he was maybe ages 7 or 8, somewhere like that. They don't really. The article doesn't specify their age, but they were very young, like elementary school, yeah, elementary school age, and he was kicked out of school because he was labeled transphobic. So it's like, you know what I mean? It just gets more and more absurd, because again, you're looking at humans as abstractions. You're looking at them as a symbol of something that is associated with that. And it's very dangerous to look at people like that.
It is. And Julie, I'm going to address your question because I think it's really interesting, but also, oh my gosh, Raphael. So, did you ever read 1984?
A long time ago.
Oh my gosh. So in 1984, because I'm a few years older than you,
I'm gonna go
I
get my charger, by the way, but I'm
yeah,
listening.
you're good. I studied it in this special class where there was like just a few of us with this teacher that was super into this book. And so we like tore it apart like line by line. And so I really overstudied that book. And it just seems as though, but the things you're talking about, like they have the 2-minute hate in there, right? And so they
Hmm.
would get people riled up every day. And it reminds me kind of watching the news right now, wherever you
Mm,
get your
yeah.
news. But it's and it doesn't matter. The enemy would change. It didn't matter who the enemy was. We just
Right.
needed an
Right.
enemy, right? And
Right.
as long as they could keep people angry, and there's a documentary, and it's a bummer because it was put on somebody that kind of had to leave office in disgrace, and that is a bummer. But this thing called The Swamp, and it's a
Yeah.
really good documentary about the same thing, about how they're like creating all this hate and all this anger, and
Right.
that it's really good for politicians. It's really bad for the population.
Yes.
But anyway, and Julie, to answer your question, she says, is it terrible that I get bored with the majority of my friends when it comes to in-depth conversations? I think that the thing is that everyone is so afraid to have a good conversation about what they really believe that they are very like boring. They are boring
Hmm.
because everyone's just afraid to like get into the weeds and really talk about what they really think because they're afraid that everyone else is going to bail. And my
Yeah.
thing this year is my no bull snark year because I don't swear on this channel. But really, I'm really over it. I'm over it all and putting up with all of it and listening to all of it. And I think it's just time that we all start talking about the things, whether people get along with it or agree with it or not. I might not like what somebody has to say, but as long as it's not like super mean and terrible, I will listen because I want to hear everybody's ideas and see both sides. And I
Hmm.
may not leave that conversation agreeing with you, but at least I'll understand where you came from. And I think there's a loss of that in our culture at this time. And I don't know if it's just here or if it's other, it seems to be in some other places as well. I was really surprised talking to somebody from the Netherlands, and they were having a lot of the same issues that we're having. And I said,
It's probably worse over there.
I thought your country was like the happiest country in the world. He's like, not anymore. Things have really changed,
Yeah.
and which shocked me because being from America, we don't hear a lot about other cultures like like that. But it's fascinating to reach out, which is Julie, why I'm so glad that you come when we go live and you give your opinion and we can talk to you, being because Julie, as I say all the time, lives in the future. And that just blows my mind every single day because it's tomorrow there. She's already lived our day, which is so bizarre to me. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's everywhere. I think we saw during the big C word that I still will not say on this channel, the things that happened. I don't know. We got an in-depth look because we were all home and just watching TV all the time and watching all these other people. The weird things that are going on all over the world. I think that I had no idea. I don't know. It's a whole thing. Um, but yeah, there were some things going on in Australia and New Zealand during that time that were kind of shocking to me. But anyway, all right. So questions, you've already answered. I have a whole bunch of questions for you about school in Russia, and you answered them all um, without me even. Okay, so but here is one. It's because this, voices of justice and tea and all. Were there any legal customs or laws? It says that you found shocking, or were very different from ours, or what you'd grown up with.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a few actually. So one is so homosexuality is legal in Russia, but displaying it is illegal. So you can't be like walking around with like a pride flag. That is legal, but it's not illegal for you to be, attracted to somebody of the same sex, which I also thought was very interesting. And they have a lot of well, it's actually, again, it's interesting because it's a Christian nation, so they have a lot of Christian values. I mean, that's the sort of like the headquarters, if you will, of the Orthodox Christian Church. So a lot of those values are present in society, right? I mean, it's really hard to divide the cultural norms that arise from Christianity as in the legal system, because I mean, even the United States has the opening of the Constitution, right? It's like we the people. Wait, actually, not the Constitution, but it's like the like our national anthem, right? It's like it's one nation under God, but so you can't really divide those two. And so I think that is how that is expressed, right? It's like it's not something that they agree with culturally, and so it's expressed in a legal form. That was an interesting one. And I mean, again, there's still like gay bars and stuff like that. You can still see it, but again, it's not you cannot display it. It's not, and even like there, talking about people policing. There's a couple of videos actually. So like, there's a pretty viral YouTube video of like two guys that were holding hands walking around a Russian park, and like everybody was like telling them that you can't do that. Not like maybe legally they could, but it was just not something that people are very open to socially. So that was interesting. And then pornography also is blocked. So anybody that would want to access that is blocked on online, so you cannot see it. It's government. It's by the government. They do not allow it online. Gambling also so illegal. There is no casinos in Russia, which is also interesting. I mean, again, it's I mean those they're not good vices, but I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not a huge gambler myself, but that is also illegal. And I think other than that, I think I mean obviously the legal system is a little different. The way people have the same sort of basic rights, but yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting, and there's also like the layer of like corruption there that's also very interesting. So it's similar to Mexico in that way, even though not as bad. Where you get a traffic ticket or whatever, you could always give the cop like slip of a 20 or something. That's something that does exist there.
And that's still
Um,
happening. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I grew up around that, because I grew up like I mean, I went to Mexico quite a bit, and like that's kind of like the unspoken rule. You get stopped by a cop, you better make sure you have like $10 on you. Like it's just a thing. So yeah, but I think those are the three main ones that I think come to my mind.
Okay, well, very cool. Oh my goodness. So Julie, I did not know that in Germany pillows are considered a weapon. That is fascinating. Now I know they have pillows, but I mean
Well,
anything could
here's
be.
an interesting one actually. So I read about a family who so they had a boy that went to kindergarten in Germany, and they told him that if the boy did not start to pee sitting down, because apparently it was patriarchal and very frowned upon for the boy to pee standing up. And so they told him that if they don't do that, they're going to go to jail for child abuse, which I thought was also very crazy.
Yeah, so there are some toileting differences between here and Germany. My daughter lives in Germany. Um, Part of that is the mess component because you have to keep everything very clean.
Well, that is true, yeah, I guess.
And so it's really hard to do that when you have a child who's whatever. And
Yeah.
as someone with 3 sons, I can tell you, oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then another thing is their toilets are different. We won't go into that, but there are shelves in there for certain reasons and very different
Interesting.
about that whole thing. Yeah. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing. We talked a little bit about that with my daughter. And can we talk about okay, this has nothing to do really with the leak. Well, it does actually. So they are so good at recycling in Germany and taking care of everything. So the trash can that we have that we empty every single day with a standard
Hmm.
American kitchen bag, they get one of those every 2 weeks. And if you put
Really?
more than that out every other week, your neighbors are angry with you and it is not okay, which honestly I
Really?
think is fantastic. Yeah, so you cannot there's no trash. And then everything is separated out. There's paper because they recycle everything. And now here in some places they say they recycle it and then they take it to the dump. Not there. They have a communal oh, what's it called? Where you put all your food leftovers or whatever in a thing.
Mhm. Oh, like a
Compost.
compost?
Oh my gosh. So when we went there, my husband was all into it. So whenever we had food left over, you put that in the composting. You never throw it in the trash. And then there's
Interesting.
plastic and paper and glass and different kinds of plastics and everything is sorted and there's a certain day and it's really kind of neat. And then car washing. Oh my goodness. You don't just go out there and run the hose and wash your car. Yeah, and on Amazon, the reviews in Germany, a lot of them are about the packaging, not the product because American people
Interesting.
send huge packages that, well, but if you think if you have one kitchen size thing to last you 2 weeks and you order 5 things on Amazon, that fills that here,
Oh, I see.
right?
Interesting.
And so they don't
Yeah.
want that. And they're like, what is the deal? Also,
Hmm.
food, Raphael. They're not allowed to have a lot of American food there because our food is very dangerous.
Hmm.
True. And so we went to a Taco Bell that had American food, and there's a sign on the wall that said, "Warning, food from the United States, not safe to eat.
I don't blame him. I don't blame him. Our food sucks.
Right.
Our food
Personally,
sucks.
I
Like,
I
yeah.
don't know. I mean, like, 3 of out of the 4 people in my house cannot have gluten, and I really don't think that has anything to do with the wheat itself. I think it has a lot to do with
Mhm.
whatever, which also should there be laws about that? Is it legal? I don't think it should be illegal. That's just my personal whatever.
Well, it's so interesting, right? I mean, because like, I mean, that's one of the problems in America. It's like lobbying is such a big part of politics, and the problem with America is that we're really good at a lot of things. Like it is an incredibly there is nobody that does marketing and business better than America. I don't care. I mean, the Chinese, you could say the Chinese are really good at manufacturing, but nobody does marketing better than America. Nobody. It's not even close, right? And I think what really ultimately what happens is that we have these things that we've marketed a certain way. And lobbying, I think, is kind of the same thing, right? You're sort of like it's sort of this plane of influence and money to get certain legislation that is more favorable to the interest of your business, right? I mean, lobbying does have its good side, I think, obviously, but when you have these like mega corporations that have unlimited money and they're lobbying, and like the pharmaceutical industry pays it's like $360 billion a year in lobbying, which is insane, right? And so it's like, okay, well, that is a problem, and that is not actual capitalism, by the way, because capitalism says there's no government involvement in economics, right? But then when you have with lobbying is actually you have the business influencing the government to create legislation that's more favorable to their business, right? It's not in the best interest of the people. It's in the best interest of stakeholders and shareholder value. And that's not conspiracy. That's just plain old
Oh, no,
American
that's just
politics.
facts. This is
Yeah,
what
it's
I
just
try to
American
explain to
politics.
people too. And really, I think that is the single worst thing that we've got going on. And yet, like you were saying, can it do good? Yes, it can, but I think 95% of the time it's not used for good. It's used
No.
for businesses to get what they want, whether or not it's healthy. And I think
Hmm.
like in the 80s, the cigarette company lobbyists, man, they did a good job. I mean, they really well, especially in the 70s,
Yeah.
because they kept everything under wraps then. But it's just amazing to me. I mean, they had I don't know if you remember, but like they had doctors advertising cigarettes for people with
Oh yeah.
asthma back
Yeah.
in the day. I mean,
I
it's
remember
just
that.
crazy what they had. So,
Hmm.
yeah, no, lobbyists are that's one of my
Yeah, but I mean, you could argue
biggest
the same thing
causes.
even with the food industry. It's the same thing, right? It's like you have the food
Oh my God.
pyramid, which is a scam, obviously, because you're not supposed to be eating that much bread. It shouldn't be the basis of your diet. And it's all based on, again, it's the same sort of concept with smoking that you mentioned, right? It's like they have these groups that are paying for the research that's saying that their product is safe, which doesn't, I mean, to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? It's like, so there is a conflict of interest. If you are the one that is funding the research that is going to prove whether or not your product is safe for consumption, and then it turns out that the research, in fact, says, yeah, actually, this is a great product. I'm like, well, yeah, but who funded the thing in the first place? And look, even if you say, okay, let's say these people, these researchers have the best intentions, right? You cannot escape psychology. So there's a great book that I recommend to anybody that is like in the influence space. So it's like salespeople, marketing people, whatever. There's a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini, and he talks about something that's called the reciprocity principle. So the reciprocity principle basically states that if you do something for somebody, they are so much more likely to do something for you, even if what you ask them to do is of greater value than what you did for them. And a great example of that, so they did an experiment where it was an art show, and there was a person there. Obviously, it was staged, right? There was a person there who was selling tickets to something. I remember exactly what tickets to, but he was selling tickets, and so he tried selling the tickets without just as sort of the control. So he went out, tried to sell tickets. He sold, I guess, let's say, just for the sake of the narration, $25, right? And then they did it again, but before he sold them any tickets, he would ask him, "Hey, do you want something to drink?" When people say yes, he would go and bring them a Coke. And after that, people were like 75% more likely to actually purchase one of the tickets. And so he then actually compares that to things like lobbying or things like donations to political candidates. He's like, even if you tell a person, "Hey, I'm going to donate these many hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in some cases to you," subconsciously, or even like, it's something they cannot avoid. The person that received the funding is almost compelled to do something in return for that person. And so when you talk about, in the context of the research, if you are a researcher, this organization, this company, these people are paying your salary to research this particular thing, you are compelled psychologically to want to do something in their favor or in service to them. It's just inescapable, right? And so that's the problem when you have, or these sort of like, huge companies that are funding the research for them to know whether or not their products are good. It's a psychological thing. It's not even about, conspiracy or anything crazy. It's just you are compelled psychologically to do it. And look, anybody can try it by themselves. You go and ask your go and give your neighbor a cookie, and then ask him for a favor, and then try it out with a couple of different neighbors, and you'll see a difference. Like it is insane how well that works. It's crazy.
It's so interesting. Also, you want to know how the food pyramid was made? I can tell you because I was there. You ready? So my
Hmm.
mom was into food. She was a food chemist. And so she had the International Food Technology, whatever symposium was happening, Las Vegas, 2004. You can look it up, the IFT. And so I went because her plus one or whatever, because, whatever, she was going by herself. And so I get to do all the spouse things. Well, one of the things that wasn't a spouse thing that I wandered into was the FDA. And this was their thing. Hey guys, we've got this shape, right? And I think it was the plate at the time. Okay,
Hmm.
we can only have the certain shape for so long. What are we going to do? They're throwing darts at the wall. They're making stuff up. They're like, should we have this shape? Should we have that shape? How should we fill it in? It was not scientific. It was just to see what people thought would look the best and convince the people that it's what they should eat. There was no basis in science whatsoever, and
Right.
I was mortified. And if it was today where we had phones, we could record. I was so have recorded it because it was crazy off the chain. And then when people are like, oh no, we have to eat that because it's recommended, I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand how it's recommended. you know it's just,
Right.
I don't know, it's just nuts to me. And the fact that there's like fats and sugars on there, like, I don't know, it was just bizarre. So
It's insane. And the thing is, it's like when I started to really dive deep into like things like marketing, that's when you really start to realize how much our brains are being manipulated and influenced on the daily, right? It's just like, a lot of people don't understand. If you're an advertiser on Facebook, you have information about people on their interests, their age, what device they're using, what websites they're visiting, and you take all of that data and then you push an ad to that person, and so then people are buying stuff without them really wanting to, because the ad is being pushed to them, right? Depending on, and then there's things like, for example, like funnels, right? Everybody talks about funnels, but really what they are is, where is that person in the journey that I have designed for them to purchase a product? So it's not even something that you're doing willingly. It's something that they are, a good marketer will craft out a journey for you to take, for you to purchase your product. It might not even be something that you want, it may not be something that you need, but it's something that they made you think they need. And then there's like the psychological component of it. So there's something called like neuromarketing, which is like understanding the way that the brain functions, and then applying or using the way that the brain works, and then to be better at marketing. So another really good example of that is sort of like understanding uh, the three layers of the brain. So you have like the first layer of the brain, which is like the most primitive layer of the brain, and then you have like the next layer, and then the cortex of the brain, right? And so like the bottom layer of the brain, that's the instinctual side. That's the reptilian brain, as it's called. So it's like flight or flight response. And then the next one is associated or responsible for feelings. And so what a lot of these advertisers do is that they've invested so many millions and millions of dollars in understanding the way the brain works, so that they're able to they're basically able to manipulate and sell people. So for example, uh, most advertisers, they'll try to get you to feel something when it relates to the product, because when you have a feeling about something, that makes you a lot more susceptible to be open to purchasing the product, because most people, well, actually everybody, makes their buying decisions not rationally. They first make their buying decisions emotionally, and then they justify it rationally. We think it's the other way around, but it's not. It actually gets really interesting if we want to go down the route of like the subconscious and symbols and all of that stuff, because it gets really, really deep. But that's really the way that these advertisers have learned to craft out messaging, to craft out imagery. When you see an advertisement, the more an advertisement can make you feel emotional, the more that you're likely to buy it. So if you look at advertising about pharmaceuticals, which the United States and New Zealand are the only countries in the world that actually legally allow pharmaceutical companies to advertise in television. But when you look at those ads, they're so confusing. They never make any sense. And the reason why is because they want to be able to get through the the um, the rational brain. So they want to remove that and they want to go into the emotional part, which is where decisions are made. So they're always very confusing. They're very nonsensical, but they're also they make you feel a certain way. So usually the emotion they want to trigger is either fear of something, right? Fear of getting sick, fear of missing out, fear of a calamity, right? Same insurance companies do the same thing. And so when they do that, then they're injecting messages into your subconscious, because the way that the subconscious work is that the subconscious is it communicates through symbology, which is super fascinating actually. And so what they try to do is, like, not only do they want to trigger an emotional response, they want to implant an idea into the subconscious. So you don't even realize that you're going to be making that decision. And you might not make it right away, but you will make it later. And it's really interesting how it works, but it's also very scary because we don't know how much of our purchasing decisions, how much of our day-to-day activities are being guided by subconscious messaging that has been implanted there by some sort of like mega corporation. And that's just a fact. Again, it's not, and that's just something you learn when you're doing marketing, because they've invested so much money into understanding that, because there's so much money in being able to sell to people and to convince people, en masse, to purchase a product. And a lot of times it's products that you don't even need, right? Because by the time you're done looking at this pharmaceutical advertisement, you don't even listen to the 50 different things of side effects that thing has. And it's always so fast. It's always in a very low tone of voice. So it doesn't register. It doesn't register for a reason. So all of that is extremely well researched and um, it's extremely well put together. And it's the same for like the gambling industry, is because the gambling industry actually has perfected the art of getting people addicted, which is fascinating, right? And video games are actually, they use the same methodology to get people addicted to a video game. So like video games, for example, are just hard enough to give you a shot of dopamine, but they're not so hard that you're not gonna want to keep playing. So it's like they let you get just enough to get to the next level, but never enough so that you can just play the games once and then you can be completely satiated. They want to keep you addicted to the video game. And then they do things like, for example, they create like something that's called, like, for example, like user journeys, right? So it's something that you do when you're creating an app on the marketing side. So you'll create a journey of how the user is going to interact with your product. And so in that journey, what they do is that they'll send out certain messages to try to keep the user engaged in the application itself. And so not only is the product designed to keep the person engaged, but also that there's a marketing component to make sure that the user keeps going back to using the product. It's fascinating.
It is. And also, I have to say, my ex-nephew created a video game that is vastly popular all over the world, and it may start with the world. And he told us, never let your children play it, because we have absolutely made it to be addictive on purpose,
Hmm.
and they shouldn't
Hmm.
play it.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
and yeah, and it was crazy because it's yeah, it's one of the most popular games all over the world. And ironically, a bunch of the characters have his face because he designed it. And
That's
so he got to put
interesting.
his face all over the stuff. And but even my kids were never allowed to play it. Uh-huh. Is there one here? Oh, it's right over here somewhere. Sorry, we got a box for my son, and he's trying to find it. I think is that right there? Also, these are 3.5. My husband bought me cords. I got a new camera, and you have to have a special cable. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it's frustrating. Okay, it's a Sony, right? This fancy pants camera.
Hmm.
And yeah, we gotta go in a couple minutes because my phone's gonna die. My phone's gonna die, and it's been over an hour. Anyway, and so yeah, you can't run this phone with this camera without the thing. Okay, so guys, it has been an hour. Raphael is gonna go. Raphael, you've been amazing, and I so appreciate you coming at the last minute and joining me
Of
and
course.
doing all this. And this has been the perfect conversation for tonight. Oh my gosh. You are literally like the only person that could have had this conversation with me. So I really appreciate it. I'm trying to fix my phone and be able to plug it in if you're wondering why I'm like bouncing all over.
No,
Um,
no worries.
Thank you. And thank you to your wife for sharing your time this evening with us, because I know that she probably needed you to do some things. And
Yeah, I'm probably gonna get it when I go
so to
upstairs.
let her know that I am very thankful that she lets you hang out with us
I'll let her know. I'll
and
let her
do
know.
that. And it's very meaningful. And this is a great conversation. We're going to clip some of it and share it because, yeah, you've said some incredible things. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to stick around for just a few minutes, and I will talk to you tomorrow. So
All right,
thank you.
take care. Bye bye. And I
All right.
hope that
Bye.
your audience enjoyed it, and I was able to give them something of value. And if you ever want me back, just let me know.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, we definitely talked about things that we've never talked about before. So that was cool. And you knew them. So there we go. Awesome.
Awesome. All right. Well,
All
take
right.
care, Jen. Talk to you
All right.
soon.
Thanks. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. All right, so now it's just me, and I'm not talking about such in-depth things because goodness gracious, he knows a lot about a lot of things. Julie, I don't know if you're still here. I don't know what is going on with my phone. I'm trying to fix it um, and plug it in and not break the thing at the same time. All right, so what's going on? Well, it's Tuesday night, and we saw the Minecraft movie. So now we're going to just get into fun things. That was crazy. Very violent, very scary characters, but under the guise of Minecraft. So it wasn't scary to children, I guess. I don't know. I thought some of it was terrifying, those pigs and whatever. But oh my gosh, did we laugh. Jack Black and the guy that played Aquaman, I can never remember his name, Jason, is that it? Anyway, hysterical, guys, hysterical. Couple times he broke out in song, and I was like, dear goodness, don't let this be a Minecraft musical, because I was not up for that, and it wasn't. But if you haven't seen it, well, you'll probably love it. It was a lot for me. It was a lot of fighting, so much fighting, but not horrible fighting. And like when they killed a pig, it turned into a pork chop. So I mean, it's not no blood, no whatever. Um, it was interesting. So this is a completely different conversation than what we were having, but I just thought I'd stick around and let you know that is what we did. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I will not be live this Thursday. My daughter is having major surgery Thursday. Not going to be sitting in the shower live. I'm going to be sitting at a hospital for about 3 days. Potentially not live Saturday either, depending if we're home. Probably won't be at the beach because I got to be with her. So there will be 2 days where I'm not live. But I think what I'm going to do is have a premiere instead, show it, and then I can be live in the chat. But I won't be able to be doing this because, she is just, yeah, it's very important that I'm there. So I love you guys. Mwah! I love you very much. This is amazing. Finally got this live stream thing. We are going to have so much fun. It's going to be regular time, regular programming, regular everything. And I've got about this many interviews that I've done that are going to be shown. And now I can tell you one last thing. Is this legal? Was the title of the thumbnail on this? And I tell you what, we're going to talk about. Also, glasses, you guys, off the chain. Okay, I know, they're crazy, but here is the situation. I lost them at the event, and I knew I was never going to get them back because it's one of those things. And so I bought these online, and I thought, you know what, if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to go crazy. And I did, and they were the craziest one they had. They're so much fun. Anyway, somebody told me that my glasses make me look old, and I'm just going to tell you I'm 56. They're not what's making me look old. It's time. I interviewed Judge Rosie today, Rosie Speedling Gonzalez. Now, I interviewed her a year ago. Things have changed a lot for her. In fact, people are very mad at Rosie because of something that happened in her courtroom. And I sent her an email and I said, Rosie, I need to get you on the show and you need to apologize because there was some stuff that happened. And she said, Jen, I don't. And I'm going to tell you why. And I thought, ugh, I think that you should be apologizing. She came on with me today and we did an interview. And let me tell you something. Number one, you're going to be really shocked at what you hear about what happened with Rosie and that autistic gentleman in court. You really are. It's going to shock you what she says. And you know what? I don't think you're going to hate her when you're done either. So I got 3 kids with autism. I was very concerned about that. And I think it's going to be quite fascinating for you to hear. So looking forward to doing that. The gala that I had, the award show, had to put it to private. It was bad. Film quality was horrible, guys. It was horrible. I've never seen a film so bad. There was no sound in the 8 minutes. We have to recreate the beginning of an award show where people flew in from all over the country. Can't recreate that. But we're doing something totally different. And my friend, Robert Riggs, who is an incredible, he was an investigative reporter. He went to Iraq, he went to Afghanistan. If there was something going on in the world the last 40 years, he covered it live. He is doing my introduction. What? He's incredible. And you're going to like it. So that's going to be coming out tomorrow. So I cannot wait for you to see. Oh my goodness, you guys, these people were dressed like it was, I can't say like it was the Academy Awards because they're copyrighted. So I won't say that. They were dressed really well. All the glitter, all the sparkles. Mwah! It was wonderful. Not as wonderful as you, though. I love you guys. Can I tell you, what are we at right now? Can I tell you something that means the world to me? I was really, really, really excited about getting to 100,000 subscribers for my birthday this year. It's in the end of May. Guys, we're on track to hit that. When we do, I'm going to do something for you, and I don't know what it is, but it's going to be big. We're going to have giveaways of epic proportion. We're going to have all kinds of incredible things because you're the ones who have got me here. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Mwah, mwah, mwah. I'm going to go now. I'm not coming back live until a week from today. As long as we're home from the hospital, I will be here a week from today. But I'm going to put out a few videos every day that I should be live. I'll put out a video because I want to make sure that you know that I love you and I'm here no matter what I'm doing. So I love you and I'm here. And I'll talk to you all soon. Okay. Have a great weekend and I'll miss you very much.